Officer Cooling and Dismaris, and they're here to talk to us about animal control issues and safety in our homes and neighborhoods. So we'd like to give them the floor, and they're going to speak and help share some of their knowledge with us. And afterwards, let us ask some questions. So thank you guys very much for sharing.
All right. My name is Tom Dismaris. I'm the patrol captain for the Sheriff's Office. And one of the things that I manage, in addition to the patrolmen, the people out here on patrolling your area as well as the rest of the county, is the Animal Services Unit. This is Dustin Culling. He's a sergeant in the Animal Services Unit. He'll give you an overview of what the Animal Services, what their function is. I know you guys have some specific questions about some issues that have been going on out here, and we'll try to answer those questions as well. So, tell me who you are and what you're all about.
Sure. Like the captain said, I'm Dustin Culling. It's great to be here tonight. So I supervise the Animal Services Division. For those of you that don't know how it works, about 3 years ago, I think, the Animal Services Division in the county went from under the Ag Department to the Sheriff's Department. So as a sheriff's deputy or a sergeant, I supervise that. So it went from one division to the other division. So now that it's under the Sheriff's Department, the sheriff is actually responsible for administering the program. And we do a couple of things. We have 6 animal services officers and a licensing clerk at the office. And those officers, I don't know if you see them, they're in the white trucks. They come through the community sometimes. You'll see them responding to calls all over the county. And they respond to a number of types of calls: humane investigations, neglect investigations, aggressive dogs, abandoned dogs. A big function of what we do is rabies control. Everybody here have their dogs vaccinated? It's really, really important. If you guys didn't know this, last year was the first case of rabies in the county, I think in almost 40 years. It was a cat up in North County, really far away from here, so you guys probably got nothing to worry about. But it was the first case we've had with a domestic animal, and we all kind of had to take a look at it and really think about how important it is to get our pets vaccinated. This was a cat, and if this cat happened to get around other cats or in a populated area, it could have been bad. So I would recommend you guys get your animals vaccinated as soon as possible if you haven't. The other thing we do is licensing enforcement. So there's another side of the rabies thing is licensing. So there's rabies and licensing. Anybody here know how many dogs you can have in Joaquin County? 3 dogs. How many cats? 3 dogs and 3 cats.
Oh, 3 and 3.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
6 animals.
So in regular house, zoned residential, you can have 3 dogs and 3 cats. So one of the other things we do is work with code enforcement. A lot of times you'll see people that have more than 3. Sometimes 5, 6, 10, 12. Not a good scenario. It's a little easier when there's a bigger property. But if you know somebody that has more than 3 dogs, you might want to have a chat with them. You could let us know, and we could talk to them also. So that's another one of the things that we do. We respond to a wide variety of calls. If I understand right, there's a feral cat group in Mountain House too. Is that you?
I'm part of that, yeah.
Okay.
I'm on the board with it.
Yeah.
Mountain House Feral Cat Rescue.
Okay. Yeah. So are you guys pretty familiar with the TNR program?
That's what we do.
Trap, neuter, and release.
Yes, that's our primary goal, and then after we soon got started, the byproduct was the kittens, and so we got into fostering and set up an adoption program and have TNR probably 200 to 300 somewhere. It's a wide range. I understand we haven't done a count right at this point, but in the 3.5 years that we've been doing it, we've somewhere in the neighborhood of 300, and then adopted out probably 150.
Is that just in the Mountain House community?
Yes.
Well, those are great numbers. I'm really glad to hear that. That's great. So that's something that we deal with quite a bit with animal services. We'll get calls from a resident anywhere in the county saying, "Hey, these cats just showed up at my house. What do? They all seem to have a clipped ear." And at that point, we go into the thing, well, you know, this is a feral cat. It's already been fixed, it's been vaccinated, and it's been re-released into the community. So there's a bit of confusion with that, though. There's people that don't mind the presence of cats because, you know, there's less rodents and they like cats. You have the other people that maybe don't like cats because they mess on their lawn, they may tear up their furniture, leave hair on the yard furniture or whatever. So if you're one of those people and you don't like the cats, you can rent a trap from us. You can take, and if, maybe you could help, but you trap the cat and you take it to the shelter or to the adoption group and find a home for it. Problem is when you just take it out into the country and release it. One of the biggest problems we have in animal services is we respond to calls, and you may see them coming, maybe going to Costco or driving on the backcountry roads. You'll see a lot of dogs just running loose. Sometimes when people realize that an animal might be too big for their house, or maybe it was a little more than they expected it to be, instead of trying to find a home for it, they'll run out into the country, throw a ball out the door, or throw a hot dog or whatever, and leave it. We get those calls, and we'll get those calls in a number of ways. The dog can get hit by a vehicle. We have an injured dog that we have to come out and deal with. Sometimes the dogs get really hungry and they attack livestock, or they're bored and they attack livestock. So we'll get the call where it gets into the sheep or into the goat pen, and livestock will get killed. So we have to deal with it in that way. And it's just so much easier if the public was just educated on different options other than just dumping it out in the county. So if there's one thing that I could tell anybody, please don't dump dogs. And if you know somebody that does, I would like to hear about it. I would definitely like to hear about it.
Or cats.
Or cats, yeah. You can't just do that. It's a misdemeanor to do that. We pursue it aggressively. It has quite an impact on the community. The farmers don't like it. We've taken calls where an entire flock of sheep or goats can get killed in a matter of minutes, it seems like. We just don't want that to happen. And for the welfare of the animals, living out in the country, having no food or whatever, it's not easy on them. So anyway, that's another one of the biggest calls for service that we have. Do you guys have any specific questions for me that I could answer?
We're curious as to when we feel an animal is being neglected or abandoned, kind of what the protocol is that you have when, let's say there's a dog that's barking incessantly for many nights in a row. What exactly is your protocol to ensure the safety and well-being of that animal while also, being safe and respecting the laws of entry and what have you?
Okay, so I heard 3 different parts to that question. First one was abandoned. The second was neglect, and the third was barking. Those are 3 separate issues. What we can't do is lump them into one issue. We need to look at the calls for what they are. So if you have a barking dog, let's talk about that real quick. Barking dog. Does anybody know what the county ordinance for barking dogs is?
I think I do, because I had my neighbors, I called and they got rid of the dog, sorry. And I love dogs. But it kept on barking and barking and barking, so someone from animal control came out, listened to it, didn't hear it, or they gave them 1 ticket, then 2 tickets, then they listen, and then finally they get like a fine or something. Am I correct?
You are so close.
Thank you.
10 minutes.
No cigar though, sorry. Yeah, so the way the county ordinance works is dog has to bark 10 minutes. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
And it does not just barking, it has to be barking for a reason that's not, so it can't be disturbed by a cat, there can't be a trespasser, it can't be because you're mowing your yard, it's just barking for pretty much no reason. So this type of county ordinance is what we call an infraction. This has to occur in the presence of the officer. So the officer has to roll up, not park in front of the house to make the dog bark, park a house away or maybe 2 houses away, maybe get out of the car and listen and look at the clock when he gets there. And if 10 minutes elapses and the dog's barking, the owner of the dog is citable. Now it's kind of frustrating because sometimes the dog will bark for a minute, stop for 2, bark for 3, stop for 1, back and forth and back and forth. So it gets kind of complicated, and I understand frustration from communities when that happens because it's pretty common. It happens quite a bit. So we have a couple ways that we deal with that. We always try to talk to the dog owner. We knock on the door. Hey, you got a problem? Your dog's barking. Is he okay? What can we do to help? There's a lot of things that we can provide material to educate the public. Sometimes they don't answer the door. Okay, so we have a couple letters that we send out, essentially putting them on notice. Hey, we've been to your house. We know there's an issue. I don't know if anybody's received one of these letters. It's called a barking dog letter. So they get a couple letters, and that puts them on notice that you guys are on our radar, you're bothering the community. It tends to solve it right there. In the event that it doesn't, we probably need to have a meeting with some residents in the area that are being bothered by it and come up with another plan. Because if it's not working, we can only work within what the law allows us to do. So if it's infraction not in our presence or it doesn't meet the 10 minutes, I can't do anything about it. But as a community, there's other options that we can do if it's a persistent problem. So that's barking dogs. Anybody else have any questions about barking dogs?
That just seems, I don't understand, because what if it's happening that night? Are you able to respond to someone calling in at midnight,
Sure.
1 o'clock in the morning?
So Animal Services doesn't work past 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay, from the patrol's on all night long. And
Yeah.
Animal Services is under the Sheriff's Department, and the Sheriff, we're like one.
Mhm.
Same uniform, same sticker on the car and everything. We're all the same now. So if Animal Services isn't on, and you have a dog barking at 8:05, anytime after 8, you can still call the Sheriff's Department.
Okay.
Say, I live at this address, the dog is barking here, it's bothering me. We'll send somebody out.
Non-emergency number?
Non-emergency number, yeah. Another thing that's frustrating is, and you guys have to understand this, is a barking dog call, as important as it is, goes below the robbery,
Right.
goes below the burglary. There's a lot of things where it can get bumped down. So it may not have the same response time as other calls. In Mountain House, you have deputies assigned here, so usually it'll be quicker than if you were in South Stockton. So, but yeah, you can call anytime.
Yeah.
Just to put a finer point on that, the deputy sheriff can write out the same citation that the animal services officer can. So if the deputy sheriff's here's it for 10 minutes, and the person's there, he can issue them a citation. It becomes problematic if nobody's at the house, because you can't issue a citation when nobody's there, and it has to be occurring in your presence, and it's an infraction, so you can't go back a day later and cite for it.
Right, so if it's happening every night, and say someone calls each night and it gets bumped down, and then, when they show up, it's not barking for 10 minutes at that time, then it just seems like, how would it ever become a problem dealt with? If you're not able to hear it for 10 minutes, or you're not able to respond because something else is going on,
So the course of action would go to the letters. I know this is frustrating because it's a process, and we have to allow people to get into compliance. So we put them on notice that this is happening. You have this amount of time to get into compliance. So we send them the letters. If compliance isn't reached by whatever time we prescribe, then we need to probably have a meeting.
So do they get the letter do they get the letter just by receiving complaints, or do you have to hear the dog barking for 10 minutes to even receive a letter?
So what happens is when patrol goes out and they knock on the door and nobody answers, they notify me. And I have my staff send a letter out saying, okay, this is address, this is when we went out there, send them a letter. So the letters go out, usually the person calls us back and says, hey, I'm sorry, whatever, there could be a number of reasons why it happened.
But will you knock on the door if you don't hear the dog barking for 10 minutes? If you come out and you only hear it for 2 minutes, will you even?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
certainly.
just wasn't sure if it had to be 10 minutes for anything to happen.
No.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
because like I said, it's better for us at 8 minutes and it stops to knock on the door and say, you were almost in violation.
Yeah, okay.
This is
that's
bothering
good.
your neighborhood, and I had to sit here for 10 minutes instead of patrolling.
Right.
So
Okay.
it helps,
That's
and we would do that.
So does the resident have to be there in order for the citation? So let's say Animal Services or a deputy sheriff does go to the house, they do document for 10 minutes, the dog is barking incessantly. Does the resident have to answer the door or be there in order for a citation to be issued?
Yes,
Okay.
citations need signed.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it would be a signature and a
And
court date and everything.
If they're not there, then a letter goes out the next day.
Typically, correct.
Okay.
But they don't receive a citation.
Yeah.
But they don't, yeah, so.
Yeah. So remember how I said it's an infraction, not in our presence? So if you ran a stop sign around the corner, and I didn't see you do it, but he did, I couldn't write you a ticket.
No, I'm talking about when the officer actually witnesses and documents the incessantly barking dog for 10 minutes long. Because I personally have been on the phone with probably 10 different times during this last year where I have asked that the officer that was responding call me back so that I know that they did have time to get out there, you know, that I could sleep at night knowing the dog was okay or the person living there was okay. And pretty much every time, maybe I'm just not aware of the follow-up, maybe they're not allowed to tell me the follow-up, but there's never been a note left because I always ask, well, did you leave your card? Did you leave a note? You know, I'd go over there, but it's 1 in the morning and my daughter's sleeping and my husband's working out of town or whatever. So on the times when I wasn't able to go over personally and leave a note, I never was aware of any follow-up, not saying that it didn't happen, but I'm just not aware of what it is, so that's why I'm asking. So they can't write a citation if the person doesn't come to the door or is not home. It's just documented and they might get a letter.
That's correct.
And when does it become a citation from that? Like how many letters do they have to get before?
It can only become a citation if it's witnessed and they answer the door.
So you can avoid a citation by just never answering the door.
That's why I said that after a couple letters go out, we probably need to have a meeting about establishing a public nuisance. Now that's going to take some work from the district attorney. That's going to take work from all the neighbors getting together and saying this is a problem and not saying I want to be anonymous. This means my name is so-and-so, this person's bothering me.
Well, but what about I'm more worried not so much about like the people being bothered by the barking dog, but like is the dog starving?
Welfare.
Because
The
the
welfare
lights
of the
have been
animal.
out, and this was another case where we went over there, the power was out in the house. There was no power, there were UPS boxes on the porch, there were the zip ties on the door from the power outage things. There was you know, one dog that had been barking for 2 weeks straight, non-stop. And then another dog that looked like it was locked in a dark garage with just a little hole that it could peek its nose out of. And I mean, the incidents kind of go on and on. When can we go back there? When can the officer go back there if a neighbor is saying the dog has been barking for 2 weeks? Like, when is it time to go back and make sure the dog
here's what
has
helps.
water?
Here's what helps. When you call to say a dog is barking, okay, and you give us specific details, what that does is that changes my state of mind when I go to the call. So if I'm going to call that says dog barking, I have to go to work in the morning, dispatchers put a lot of information in the call. So if you call and say, hey, I'm bothered by this dog, I can't sleep, my kids are waking up, whatever, we go to this call as a barking dog call, okay? If you call in and say, this dog is barking, the power's out in the house, there's no cars there, I think somebody's dead, what that does is it changes my state of mind when I go to the call. So what you can do to help us is make sure that dispatchers or the communication center understands all those little details that help us out. A car has been parked there, it's got a flat tire, there's a number of things that you can do as being a good observer and report to us. It really helps us develop our case, and it changes our state of mind when we show up. So now I'm looking, you know what? There is a car here that looks, you know, expired registration or whatever it might be. I see that the windows are now, you know, broken or whatever. It changes everything. Versus I'm going here to, you know, document a dog barking, and it helps us out. So if it now becomes a humane case where I'm worried about the welfare, dogs can bark for a number of reasons. A number of reasons the dog can bark. If it's because there's something wrong, something's hurt, or it's hurt, we need to know about that. So if you think that that's part of why it's barking, then please tell our communication center. If it's just barking because it's being a dog, or there's a cat, or something like that, or you know, once in the house, then it still can bother you, and we can still cite for it. But we just need to know those things. That's
Yeah. It's a different mindset going into that call.
At what point does that change from a barking dog to neglect? Or an abuse case, neglect, abuse, same thing. At what point does your mindset change from when we continue to call for the situation that Debbie's explaining? People are continuously calling about this dog. At what point, because the owners are not there, and you're not going to be able to get a hold of them, at what point does that dog become abandoned or neglected then?
Okay, so we'll talk about neglected animals. Barking can be an indicator of that. I'll be the first to admit that, okay? I understand that barking can be an indicator of that. It's not the only indicator, though. There's a number of things that tell us that a dog is neglected. Physical appearance has a lot to do with it. The conditions of the house have a lot to do with it. Is there food present? Is there shelter present? The tone of the bark. Is it yelping? Is it crying? Or is it just barking? These are all factors. And when we get the call on the screen, when we start developing that state of mind, when we respond and we show up, we're looking at the entire picture. We're looking at what you've told us, what we're seeing, and we're coming up with a picture of what we understand the situation to be. Our understanding of that may not be the same as your understanding of that. Our officers are experts in the field. They've taken hundreds of dogs off the street. When they look at an animal, they can tell a neglected dog from an uncomfortable dog, from an abused dog, from a completely happy dog. They all have different characteristics. They wag their tail funny, wiggle their little ears funny. There's a number of things that can show us that. So we have to look at the totality of the entire circumstance. I can't take a dog because it's barking. If I took a dog just because it was barking, that would be illegal, and it would be wrong, and we just can't do that. We have to look at the entire set of facts. There's times where, and I know this is really hard for a lot of you to call, because we're on the same team, and we need to be doing this together. And a lot of times it feels like the information flow is one way. You got to understand that we really can't comment a lot on ongoing cases. So if you call and say, hey, I called about this dog, these people, but it may be completely legitimate, it may be completely 100% true, but I'm not going to tell you what I did. I can't do that. I just can't. And if any of you are on Facebook, you'll see why. The first thing that happens is it goes on Facebook, and it takes on a life of its own, and it's not the truth. It just isn't the truth. Our actions aren't really what's reflected on the Facebook comments. So it's really, really important that we get the information from you and you understand that we are doing our job. It's just that we can't give you guys all the details. I can say that we responded, I can say when we did, and so.
I was just going to add.
Sorry. I have a hound dog, a basset hound. Super sensitive to, very good nose. Can smell a cat a mile away. In that situation, usually cats will hang around me in the backyard for some reason on the fences. How would you, look at that situation if there's like feral cats around?
Yeah.
Or even maybe another dog, like kitty corner.
You talking about your dog barking as a result of the cats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, they're not here yet because I'm getting my back. I just moved here, so I'm getting my backyard done. So they're my in-laws.
Yeah.
And
I had a basset hound for a long time.
they're great
I have a
dogs.
basset hound.
Yeah, they're awesome dogs.
Basset hound club.
They are. They're really sensitive. Because
Yes.
I guess they're bred to find rabbits and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So here's the problem we have is you have the people that want to save feral cats and let them go, and then you have the people that say these feral cats are causing a problem on my property.
Right.
How are we going to find the common ground?
Exactly. Because my dog.
Because you didn't ask for these cats to show up, and I get that completely.
Right. And they will go. My dog will go crazy.
You will go nuts. Yeah.
When they're on the lawn or near the house, and honestly, I'm not a cat. I don't hate cats. I'm just not a cat
Sure.
person. I prefer dogs.
Yeah.
So
I get it completely. And
I don't want.
Believe me, this isn't the first conversation I've had about it. I've had people call me and say, hey, this van just dumped 30 cats in my front yard, and it's completely legitimate because it's the...
Yeah, so, I mean, I personally don't want the feral cats in my neighborhood, and my dogs don't.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair
The bird people don't either. There's a lawsuit, I don't know if you heard about this, but the Audubon Society is suing the TNR people for releasing cats in and killing birds, so it's taken on a whole other... There's no happy, it's so hard to find a happy medium.
So how's this fair to me and my dogs? If my dog's going nuts, people are complaining that my dogs are barking, but like, hey, dude, they're cats.
I know.
You know?
Call the Feral Cat Club to come pick them up.
You can trap them. You can trap the cats.
That's an expense to me, though.
Generally, the complaints aren't because dogs are barking because of the noise. Generally, the complaints are people are wondering if the dogs are okay because the dogs sound distressed. There's a difference between, my dogs do that too. The feral cats come and sit on the fence and drive my dogs insane. So that's not really the complaining that we're hearing. I wouldn't really worry about it too much.
Well, basset hounds, they have a bay, so that they like howl and like, Sometimes it sounds like they're kind of in distress, but they're not. It's just the way it is.
In short, I would say talk to your neighbors. They're going to complain if there's a lot of noise.
These cases, we're not going to drive around and if we hear a dog barking, go inside the owner on our own. It's something that the neighbors, some neighbors have a higher tolerance. It doesn't bother them that dog barks. I got a neighbor that his dog barks probably 8 hours of the day, but I've gotten used to it so I don't hear it anymore until my dog goes there and starts barking with it. But if somebody calls and complains and it's disturbing their their life, their quality of life, then we have to act in accordance with the county ordinance says. In that case, I think the sergeant explained that if there is some provocation, that may change things. And if you can show us what that provocation is, if we're going in there and we see a cat on the other side of the yard walking on your fence or whatever, that may mitigate your ability to get your dog to stop barking. Consider that.
I have another question. I'm a runner and I run around the Richmond Park and the owners of dogs, sometimes they let the dog finish the poop and they poop and then they leave, like they turn around and leave like, So it's like a nuisance for people like us. We're running around, doing exercise, doing stretches and seeing all that, all over the place, and sometimes kids step on it, sometimes it's in the middle of the sidewalk also.
I can answer that.
So this is again is a problem and an issue
on the camera of my house, and I talked to the old gentleman sheriff. I said, I can show it to you, the people who do it. Can you write citation?
Yeah, the problem is there's not a county ordinance for that. And
On my lawn,
it's been
on my
brought,
lawn, not in front of the weekend. I live in my yard, front yard, in the driveway.
But
Come on, people, you want
the issue has come up through the board several times, going back 3 or 4 years ago. And there was never a consensus of whether or not you guys actually wanted a county ordinance for that. There are ordinances that can be drafted, and that's something maybe when you go to one of the board meetings, if you can get them on board, it's not a real hard process for us to do. It has to be approved by the board of supervisors. But a lot of cities have them, and one could be crafted for Mountain House as well. I think what part of the problem was they had some people that couldn't agree. They wanted people to be cited if their animals were urinating on lawns, and that became problematic, and I think the whole thing kind of stalled because there wasn't a whole lot of agreement. But there was an interest at one time for that, and I think that if you express those concerns to the board, it may be an interest that they're willing to take on again. Yeah, go ahead.
So, am I hearing that it's not, the ordinance is not there only in Mountain House and it is there in other parts of the county?
No, the county doesn't have an ordinance.
The county itself doesn't have?
It doesn't have an ordinance. Mountain House, the county has ordinances, and a lot of those can be carried over to Mountain House. Mountain House has its own ordinances, which most of them are just county ordinances, as I say, are Mountain House. But the defecation on property and not picking it up, that has never been adopted as an ordinance by the county. A lot of cities have them, and it's something that if that's what you guys were interested in, and the board approached the board of supervisors requesting that, I think that's something that would be doable.
Well, I have 2 things. I think on that topic, as neighbors, we should kind of keep an eye out for each other. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I walk my dog and I clean up after others. So if you sees that, I would approach the person nicely and just, ask them. But on the second part, back to the neglect issue, I think I want to move forward if you'd all agree. I want to address a specific situation. There was a dog that was abandoned for 3 weeks, and calls were received regarding the barking, and from what we understand, they came out a couple of times, and actually the sheriff came out and fed a dog that was clearly tied to a door, and which heightened everyone's sensitivity to this was we actually have pictures of where the dog tried to chew through the fence, the water lines, etc. The feces were piled up. Now that's clearly a sign of abandonment, and so I think that's mainly why I'm here tonight.
That's what started this.
That's what started all this. So,
and one of the deputy sheriffs, I actually spoke to him. I interviewed him on the phone, who told me, I'm not trying to rat anybody out or get anybody in trouble, that he had been over there feeding the dog out of the kindness of his heart. And it's like, okay, well, that's really kind, but the dog should have been removed. The dog was abandoned. The couple, there was 2 women that lived there, and they actually moved. And they moved across town, and you know where they moved, and where they work, and who they are. They moved, and they left their dogs in the backyard. And it had been going on for a long time. Neighbors were taking pictures of the feces piled feet high in the backyard. So it was already like animal abuse that turned into animal abandonment. And so we're really, like, as a community, this is happening so much over and over, and maybe that we're just not aware of some of the follow-up. Like we said, we can't answer to all the follow-up. That's why we were wanting to get a clear, because if we're not talking about one specific instance, you can tell us what the protocols are, such as they can't receive a citation if they're not there to sign for it. So that's really good information for us to know, so we won't hound your officers about doing it if it's not protocol. So that's kind of what our meeting is about. But we're wondering sometimes, we are giving details, and we kind of have a task force to where we're really following up, to make sure that the details are given. And how can it happen? Is it just like an isolated incident where the deputy sheriff didn't know? From what I understand from speaking with him directly, he didn't understand that he actually could, due to the letter of the law, remove the dog based on the visual clues that the dog was skin and bones and starving and clearly abandoned.
And left it for a good Samaritan to take.
And was actually told, and then I spoke to this 20-year-old young woman that went vigilante style and removed the starving pit bull herself. And the deputy sheriff actually told her to do it. He was there while she did it. And so then we were left unable to go after the women that had broken the law and not only abused these animals, or this animal, but then abandon it. So now we couldn't follow up with the protocol to make sure that that woman faced a judge, So we just really want to tighten everything up in our community so that this stuff doesn't happen, because there's a lot of animal lovers here, and I honestly don't care about barking dogs. If I wanted to live in pure silence, I would live up in the mountains where I had no neighbors. But we live with 4,000 homes. And so there's going to be barking dogs, get over it, but we want to make sure that the animals that are here are okay. And a lot of times they're not. They're freezing cold in the backyard, no power in the house, barking all night long. How do we make sure they're okay? And how do we as a community feel like we know that things are followed up on? But that incident is what really sparked this whole group.
We're trying to start a group where maybe on Facebook or something, if we're aware of something, we can follow your protocol to make sure that these things are addressed. Aside from, I have great neighbors, and I have one that barks all the time, and I just went next door and said, hey, is there something I can help you with? Do you need a crate? Do you need me to watch it for a while? I didn't know it was barking. So a lot of the times people aren't home and they know their dogs, or they don't know their dogs are barking. But I don't think that was the issue here. So I think we just, as a community, the only time change is going to take place is when it starts here, and that's what we want to do from here on forward, is how can we make a change? How can we be proactive and follow the protocol of the law as well? So, didn't mean to jump forward that fast, but I think that's primarily why we're all here. Most of us, I
think we'd like to have some resources that can help you as much as help us as citizens. Because I can imagine that barking dog calls is not the highlight of the day. It's not for us either. But we do have some legitimate concerns with the cases of animal neglect. The pit bull, like Debbie said, is what got our group together. So we'd like to hear from you, what can we do as a community to make it easier for you to enforce the laws? What are there resources that we can put together? As Chris mentioned, a Facebook group where we have form letters that we can hey, your dog is barking in a nice way, that you can go over and do that before you have to call animal services,
Yeah.
those types of things, so that I think people feel like they have no recourse, they don't know what to do, so they go on Facebook and complain.
Well, we realize too that animals are like at the bottom of the totem pole. And I've been working with animals for 30 years, and I know that a robbery takes precedence over at any time. Animals have always, it's not a priority.
We don't have that many robberies in Mountain House,
Right,
though. and,
right, well, yeah.
Well, and there is one other thing that you guys can do collectively as a group. And, we have 6 animal services officers and Dustin supervising them. You have 6 deputy sheriffs working out here, and there's nothing to say that the Mountain House Board can't lobby for an animal control officer to work exclusively out with a 7th animal control officer. Now that's going to cost some money to do that. It's not free. But that would be one thing that would give you more assurances that the things are getting followed up on quickly. The 6 officers, they're working. They're on, 3 different shifts. So you might have 3 working at one time, maybe 4 working at one time, but they're covering the entire county. Every call is a priority. The message that we've sent to them, and we enforce it, is they get off at 8 o'clock, but if there's calls pending at 8 o'clock, they're going to stay on until the calls are completed.
My experience is that there's been an amazing response time. So if it's in the middle of the night, the deputy sheriff is generally there within minutes, and then is always awesome about calling back to follow up that he did go out if you requested he do that. Same, animal services also. There seems, with a few exceptions, when they're, tending to a slaughtered, herd of sheep or something, are generally out like pretty quickly. It's just that we're wanting to know, we're wanting to tighten up, what are they doing when they get there? Because if they're there and they're documenting that there's a barking dog for 10 minutes straight, and all 4 different neighbors have called, are they going to leave a note on the door? Because that hasn't been my experience. But would that be helpful to have a note or a business card?
I order hundreds and hundreds of these every year. Hundreds of these notes that we leave. We leave them daily, all over the place. You may not see us do it, but we leave them daily, all over the place.
Because what I hear after hours is that the deputy sheriff says, well, I entered it in the system so that animal services will respond to the call tomorrow. I did document that the dog was barking incessantly. I documented longer than 10 minutes. Now I'm leaving a message, or on, I don't know how you do it, through email or whatever, so that animal services will visit tomorrow. And so I'm certain that that's happening, and that they're doing their
and that's appropriate.
job.
That's what they're supposed to do.
But if the dog isn't barking because now it's 60 degrees instead of 30 degrees, and they're still outside, and then we just really want to know if we believe that the animal doesn't have proper shelter.
So here, let me just, I'm not trying to stop you, but here's the issue we're going to have. Everybody has a different idea of what proper care for an animal is.
What's the law?
You want the straight up law? I'll tell you what it is. For me, you want to know what has to happen for me to jump over a fence and grab a dog?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Typically, the dog would have to be non-ambulatory.
So not moving at all.
Alive, but not moving. Okay? I'm just going to let that sink in because I know that's very hard to hear.
Yeah.
It's very hard to hear because we walk away from houses where there's dogs that are thin, they have ribs showing, still alive, not necessarily dying, but just because a dog is thin doesn't give us the authority to jump a fence.
Right, but I work at a vet hospital in Tracy, so I see them when they come in as emergencies. I believe I was there when the one you're talking about was taken care of. So,
You work at Jules Vet?
I do, yeah.
So you know I was there, right?
I didn't see you that day, but I saw them as they left, yeah.
So then you wouldn't jump the fence had you seen that dog that was skin and bones. You wouldn't have jumped the fence and
So here's what we have to do. If I see a dog, and I really hesitate to give you definitive.
I'm talking about that instance.
Okay, but I don't want you to apply this to lots of incidents.
No, just that instance.
Okay, because every situation, like I explained, we look at the totality of everything. The past history of the house, conditions of the house, there's a whole lot of stuff we look at. So to say that a dog is thin, I'm going to jump a fence is incorrect. If a dog is thin.
No, the neighbors could confirm that the people moved out 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
That instance.
I have to find that out myself.
Well, right, so you have to ask the neighbors.
I can't just, exactly.
Right.
It's an investigation. It takes a lot of, we talk to a lot of people. We have our own observations we make, our own expertise that we look at. We look at the animals. There's a lot that we need to do before I can violate somebody's castle and take their animal. I am supposed to post it even, giving them 48 hours to respond. Okay? It's called a pre-seizure notice. I brought one here I could show you.
Okay, well that answers the
There's
question.
a pre-seizure notice. Okay, so if there's, see, that's what I was afraid of. I don't want you to jump with that. Okay, 48 hours is going to come. That's not going to happen. There's very limited circumstances where that's going to happen. So by telling you this, I'm doing it at the risk of you thinking I'm going to take every dog within 48 hours.
No,
I
don't think
I
you're
just
saying that.
For me, I think, and being also working at Jules, I get asked the question myself. I'm a receptionist there, and there's got to be in the law, like what abuse is defined as, what neglect is defined as, what, you know, all of these things, so that when you respond, exactly what is your protocol? So knowing that the dog is non-ambulatory but alive, that's what gives you permission.
That makes it exigent. So now, if I walk away from this dog, it's probably going to die. So I need to act.
Okay.
But there's cases where a dog is thin. If I walk away, it's going to live for a week.
Right,
It scraps, there's things, so I don't have the right or the legal ability to jump a fence and do that.
Yeah.
So what I do is I still post my notice.
Okay.
And I demand that they contact me.
Okay.
And I monitor that animal.
Okay.
And we follow up on it.
All right.
I can't tell you all this as it's happening because it's an active criminal
No,
case.
absolutely. I
So
understand.
I think that's where a lot of the disconnect occurs, is I'm not able to comment on a lot of the stuff that occurs.
Very secret, and then we're left to say, oh, they did nothing.
And
And
it's
then
on
it's on
Facebook.
Facebook,
Exactly.
and you guys are.
Does anybody else have any more questions of us? And we'll get out of here.
I appreciate you guys coming. I didn't want to discount what you're doing by being here, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out and spending the time to inform us. Thank you.